The mayor on crime. In his State of the City, Andrew Ginther remains optimistic. We speak to him and his new hire, who has one clear mission.
This preventable accident has put a scarlet letter on our town.
A face to the disaster. Congress hears from the people who live near East Palestine, and it's the governor this morning with a clear message for the railroad responsible.
It was their train, their tracks, their accident. They're responsible for this tragedy.
And how an energy company forced to offload power plants could be rebuying one just across state lines. Well, good morning, and thanks for joining me for this week's edition of Face the State. I'm Clay Gordon in for Tracy Townsend. We start this week with the ongoing battle over crime. While the violence is down in the city of Columbus, there's been no shortage of it. Fighting crime is the top priority of the Columbus Mayor, Andrew Ginther, who made the topic the kingpin of his re-election year State of the City address.
My top three priorities are neighborhoods, neighborhoods, neighborhoods. And that starts with making them safer. Although we faced our fair share of challenges on this front, I'm proud of the fact that we have a record of success. We will not rest. We will not yield. We will not stand down. We will continue to do everything we can to reduce gun violence in our community.
Data compiled by 10 TV's Crime Tracker team shows the decrease in violence. Columbus ended 2022 with 140 homicides, a 32% decrease from the previous record-breaking year. Other violent crimes were also down. But despite the decreases, one thing has risen: violence among teens, and it's concerning for the mayor.
But we simply can't arrest our way out of crime. We have to do all that we can to interrupt the cycle of violence and, if possible, stop it from forming in the first place.
This morning, we're taking a deeper dive into those crime prevention plans. Here's Tracy Townsend, moderator and host of Face the State.
Thank you and good morning. We are talking with Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther and the newly appointed director of the city's Office of Violence Prevention, Rena Scheck.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. All right, so Mayor Ginther, we want to start with you. And we heard your State of the City address, and you outlined a number of initiatives, and you talked about your track record. What are the next steps?
Well, safety is going to remain our top priority moving forward, and our comprehensive approach has shown some great results. We've had homicides drop by 33%, the biggest drop of any big city in the country. And we think it's been because of our comprehensive approach on prevention, intervention, and enforcement. That's why we're excited about Director Scheck helping to lead the start of our Office of Violence Prevention, so we really can focus on prevention and intervention as a city and as a community. Enforcement obviously is going to be spearheaded by Chief Bryant and the Department of Public Safety, and they're doing great work. We got a record number of tips from last year from the community. They're stepping up. A record number of illegal crime guns off of the street. We believe prevention, intervention, and enforcement is going to help us become the safest big city in the country. And
so just to follow up, you gave a statistic there. People who tune in and watch us on the news, we are talking about crime, it seems, every day, whether it's a Kia or a Hyundai being stolen or a shooting. I mean, what can you offer in terms of some tangible ways to address what appears to be rising crime in Columbus?
It's actually going down, and when you look at our rates compared to the other big cities of the country, we see those numbers, and we're proud of the work that police is doing. We think there's even more that can be done in prevention and intervention, but this comprehensive approach matters. So we're funding record numbers of officers going through the academy this year, and by the end of next year, we'll have more police officers on the street than ever before in our city's history. But we can't police our way out of the crime that we're seeing. If we want to become the safest big city in America, we need somebody like Director Scheck leading our prevention and intervention efforts and engaging the entire community. What else we can be doing with our young people to make sure if they're on the right track, they stay on the right track. And if they aren't, how do we get them back on the right track? Ultimately, prevention and intervention efforts are critically important. But if young people are making bad decisions and are using guns and involved in violent crimes, we're going to need enforcement and work with the criminal justice system to get violent folks off the street.
And let me just follow up before I move on to Director Scheck. You were talking about the police department. Have you thought about, there was a state lawmaker, a couple of them, who said maybe we should lower the age for minimum requirement to be a police officer. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I'm torn. I'm interested in the conversation. I do believe that, you know, with a certain amount of age comes a certain level of maturity. And I think about the difference between an 18-year-old, a 21-year-old, a 25-year-old. I mean, we give officers incredible power. Mayors, governors, and presidents do not have the power to stop somebody, to question somebody, to take away their freedom, and ultimately take away their life. That's a huge amount of power that we give our officers. And that comes with great responsibility. And so interested in the conversation. Obviously, there are cities all over the country that are trying to get more folks into law enforcement. But we got to make sure we're getting the right folks at the right time in their lives if they're really going to serve and protect everybody in the community.
All right, Director Scheck.
Yes.
Prevention in a big city like Columbus. First of all, congratulations, and why did you say yes to this position?
Thank you. Well, when the mayor asks, you don't say no. So, no, but truthfully, the reason I said yes was because I've dedicated my entire career so far to this point to trying to help this very issue. The last 10, 12 years, I've been involved in the criminal justice system, working in criminal defense as a Franklin County public defender. And in that time, aside from dealing with somebody's legal case, what you do the majority of your time is help connect them to resources. So really helping people here in Columbus connect to the resources that they need to either not further commit crime or to try to help prevent them from committing crime in the first place. And so that's something that I'm absolutely passionate about. I've devoted my career to it, and I'm really excited to continue that career in this respect.
So give us an idea for people at home. What will you do to prevent crime? Because it seems like it's just so rampant and so random.
Sure. So if you really look into the statistics, it can be random. Most of it is not. Most of it is led by some other type of factor that's playing into it. And of course, I don't have to tell you that crime is multifaceted. And somebody can be participating in a criminal act for a host of reasons, most of which I have learned and spent a great deal of time with over the years, learning exactly what motivates or what causes somebody to be justice involved, particularly in the criminal justice system. And so, in my opinion, prevention really looks like this agency helping to coordinate all city anti-violence programming to begin with, and then we hope to build relationships with our community-based organizations, our nonprofits, our members of the community who are just trying to do this work themselves, so that we're all on the same page. We're aligning strategies and we're going forth together. And I think that that will help us not only to not be duplicative in areas, to make sure that we're spreading out resources evenly and hitting all of those facets that cause crime in the first place.
And when you look at crime, and renowned criminologist David Kennedy has been working on this with us through the group violence intervention, we know that it's just under 500 folks in this community that are committing about 50% of the violence. So these are folks that are involved in illegal gangs, you know, drug activity, those types of things. And so it's a very, very small number of folks. But it means that we need to have the best prevention and intervention efforts to make sure that number of folks committing violent crime doesn't grow. And ultimately, how do we get those folks off the street? How do we get those guns off the street? How do we de-escalate, you know, some of the violence that's taking place amongst gangs? And so that's where prevention and intervention efforts are so critically important. We're going to continue to make funding the police department a #1 priority. Chief Bryan is doing an incredible job building police community relations. We're going to continue to invest in staffing for her. But we believe that we can realize our vision of becoming the safest big city in the country if our prevention and intervention efforts are coordinated, aligned, and strategically invested.
Okay, so the last question I want to ask you then along that lines, is it going to be 6 months before we see an action plan or something happen, or a year? How does that look?
For us, we have to start by hiring staff, and so I think the next 3 to 6 months is really going to be focused on that administrative functioning, making sure that we're building the right team. But where we will begin from day one, once the doors are open, is doing an inventory of exactly all the programming that we have going on in the city. So within our city departments, and then moving outward to those rings, those community-based organizations and other community members, nonprofits, the like, to really figure out what what do we have? What does the landscape look like right now? When Columbus Public Health made this recommendation to the mayor, what they found in all of their research is that Columbus is actually home to some of the best programming across the nation. And employing some of the best practices that are recommended for an Office of Violence Prevention or anti-violence programming across the board. But what we could improve upon was that coordination piece, and that some of our organizations are doing the same work as some of the other ones in the same areas. And so we really want to just be the hub to, like the mayor said, to align those efforts to make sure that we are as top-notch as possible in that prevention and intervention space.
People hire mayors to solve problems. So yesterday is when you're going to start seeing some of the results. You know, you're going to see this with the after-school programming we're expanding at the request of Columbus City Schools, particularly for middle school students. Really a big need for the school district, and we're stepping up to help out with that. Obviously, Director Shack's going to be involved with that work as well. Certainly what we're going to see this summer, you know, for summer programming, summer youth employment, but we really want that programming and employment to last throughout the school year, not just in the summertime. You know, making sure a lot of our kids are doing great things, and we want to lift up and celebrate them and continue to offer more opportunities up. But for kids that aren't on the right track, you know, we're going to be focused on intervention and ultimately enforcement because we need to keep our community safe.
All right, so we thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We will check back with both of
Good.
you in 3 to 6 months, and you're on the campaign trail, so we'll find you too.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for coming in.
Now, the mayor's entire address is 14 pages long. Crime did take up some 4 pages of that speech, but there are many other points highlighted in his plan for the city and how he intends on implementing it. We've posted his State of the City in its entirety to 10tv.com. This week marks 2 months since a Norfolk Southern train derailment, causing the evacuation of East Palestine, Ohio, and igniting a federal and state conversation on railroad safety. Well, this week, more pressure was put on the railroad as new details are shared about the derailment and its aftermath. In its hearings this week, it's clear there's a bipartisan consensus that rail safety must be addressed. Lawmakers heard from several people, including an East Palestine mother who fears for her family's health and the future of her home. Tracy Townsend shares her message.
I'm here to put a face on this disaster.
Misty Allison traveled from East Palestine to describe what her community is facing in the aftermath of the derailment.
I could see a huge fireball from my driveway. My 7-year-old has asked me if he is going to die from living in his own home.
She told lawmakers she fears for their health and that it's not going to be an easy recovery.
This preventable accident has put a scarlet letter on our town. People don't want to come here. Businesses are struggling. Our home values are plummeting. Even if we wanted to leave, we couldn't. Who would buy our homes?
Since the train derailed, Ohio's U.S. senators have united in a bipartisan effort to enforce tougher regulations.
They compromise safety, cut costs to boost profits. The communities along their route be damned.
Senators grilled Norfolk Southern's CEO on what went wrong.
Why did the second hot box reading not trigger action?
Senator, my understanding is that that second reading was still below our alarm threshold.
Alan Shaw says he supports safety reforms like increased training and phasing out older railway cars, but stopped short of other commitments.
Will you commit to supporting legislation requiring at least 2-person crews on all freight trains?
Senator, we'll commit to using research and technology to ensure the railroad operates safely.
Governor Mike DeWine also testified this week from the small town.
It was their train, their tracks, their accident. They're responsible for this tragedy.
And is pushing for accountability.
I urge the Senate and House to swiftly act to improve the safety of our railroads. Norfolk Southern must do everything in its power to put everything back as it was in East Palestine before 8:55 Friday, February 3rd.
Tracy Townsend reporting there. In the last week, the majority of the state congressional delegation introduced a bill that aims to improve rail safety. This is in addition to similar legislation being considered in the Senate. The bills nearly mirror each other. However, the House bill doesn't require a 2-person crew requirement like Senators Vance and Brown have proposed. Proposed requirements would also include more detectors that watch for overheating train axles. There's also funding for training first responders on hazardous materials and research for conducting and constructing safer rail cars that transport those materials. Now, testimony revealed this week found many of the 300 first responders who were at the scene were ill-equipped and untrained to fight the massive chemical fire. Facing scrutiny, the railroad opened a new training center along the tracks in northern Ohio. As Chief Investigative Reporter Bennett Haberly reports, the railroad says this isn't about optics.
Sometimes they rip off the ends of it.
This train carrying first responders is meant to provide them with an education, part of a series of safety sessions Norfolk Southern is offering nearly 2 months after a train carrying toxic materials derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. Facing criticism over what happened, I asked a spokesman for the company this. Did they learn worst case scenario things? Because one of the lessons that came out of East Palestine were some of the fittings melted. And there was confusion over what was actually in the tank cars because the placards, the diamond placards melted. So do you guys go over that as well?
Yeah, so obviously the training is meant to be a training. It's not a stunt. We want to bring these guys out here to learn what could happen on the railroad and how to respond to it. We go through a number of different scenarios, and in addition to that, obviously, with regard to East Palestine, what happened there, we continue to work with the NTSB, the FRA, to identify what we can do to make Norfolk Southern an even safer railroad.
Norfolk Southern says this is just the start. Those in attendance got an up-close education on tank cars, valves, and the use of an app called Ask Rail that can help identify what's being hauled in the event of an emergency.
It's a whole different situation on February 3rd, so we wouldn't have been able to do what we learned today anyhow.
Deputy Chief Rick Gorby with the East Palestine Fire Department was hesitant to talk about the events surrounding the derailment and their response. While he did say the training was valuable and that other fire departments should attend, he stopped short of saying that the app would have helped them that day.
Why so? It was just too big of an incident. We knew what we had pretty quick off the get-go, so that's when we backed off.
I also spoke to a firefighter from Cardington who told me he found this training to be helpful as well.
You know, if anything were to happen out there, we kind of want to be prepared, make sure we have the knowledge available to make good decisions if something were to happen like that.
Right. Is it more on your mind since East Palestine happened?
I would say, yeah. I mean, it's not really something we thought about until, all these started popping up around Ohio, and it's, it possibly could happen at home, so.
Ohio's 2 U.S. senators have pushed for advance notification for first responders on what's being hauled through their towns. Norfolk Southern says this event is just the start in a series. They have plans to build a permanent facility, although there's no timeline or exact location that's been determined. In Bellevue, Ohio, Bennett Haberly, 10 TV News.
Still ahead this morning, the push for more AEDs in Ohio schools.
I think that is the jump that we need. We need to be holding our leaders in our schools and our leaders in our athletic facilities accountable, and it needs to be a requirement.
We explore what the bill would require of school districts. Also, could there be even more sweeping rules in the near future? And why the company at the center of the state's massive racketeering scandal wants to repurchase a power plant it was forced to sell. Welcome back. It's hard to forget these moments of fear and uncertainty when Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin went into cardiac arrest and was then resuscitated right there on the field. Even after his remarkable recovery, Hamlin's still awaiting doctors to clear him to return back to his football career. But one thing is certain, what took place in Cincinnati is creating conversations about the importance of AEDs nationwide, including right here in Ohio. It's also sparking a discussion about when athletes can play again. Just this week, testimony was heard for a bill that would add new requirements for AEDs. Right now, the state requires education about sudden cardiac arrest to protect athletes at youth, middle, and high school levels. The proposed laws would go a step further, requiring AEDs in all schools and recreation facilities. It would also create protocols for students to return back to athletic events, even if they are known to be at risk. 10 TV first explored the lack of mandates for AED in other locations last month. From your pharmacy to your place of worship where you pump gas, none of them are mandated to have one. Here's 10 TV's Kevin Landers.
1, 2, 3.
The scariest part of sudden cardiac arrest,
So you want to keep your elbows locked,
is that every minute a person doesn't get a shock from an AED or automated external defibrillator.
Attach pads to bare skin.
Their chance of survival is reduced 7 to 10%.
the defibrillator is what's actually going to reverse the cause of the cardiac arrest. CPR is buying us time and giving us a viable patient for that defibrillator to restore that normal cardiac rhythm.
Also called a doctor in a box because it tells an untrained person how to use it, this life-saving machine wasn't there when Jill Hutchinson's father, Van,
and he never got to meet my kids.
Collapsed inside this Lowe's store in May of 2001.
I believe that it would have made a difference possibly in my father's life. I was actually told that at the hospital, but between the time the squad got there and the time that he got to the hospital, he was pronounced dead.
Nearly 30 states have mandates that AEDs be placed in specific businesses, not Ohio. Sarah Bops teaches CPR and AED training across the state.
I train pharmacists for 5 different major companies, and not one of them have AEDs in all of them.
She believes it's time Ohio mandates AEDs.
I'm actually trying to get in front of somebody in the state of Ohio that can recognize that there should be a bill that mandates that there should be an AED in any company that deals with pharmaceuticals in Ohio, period.
When a woman was shot to death at this strip mall on Sunbury Road in January, an employee at this urgent care told us there wasn't an AED in the store, so we ran next door to the Kroger to get one. Places like the BMV, places of worship, even schools aren't mandated to have an AED.
1 in 50 schools is going to experience a sudden cardiac arrest event each school year.
Nurse Sarah McGraw-Timmis is the health coordinator for Lancaster City Schools. Here, every school has 3 AEDs, which she says is unusual.
Do you think that should change?
Yes, I do. I think every school should be furnished with AEDs.
Mary Newman is the president of the Sudden Cardiac Foundation.
Making AEDs mandated in places of large gatherings, it's absolutely essential.
She says when someone provides CPR immediately, survival increases 30%.
And when people use an AED immediately, it goes up to 50%.
The high cost of an AED was once a deterrent for many to own one. Experts say not anymore.
If you can afford an iPhone, you can probably afford an AED.
Step 1. Cardiologist Dr. Michael Jolly has seen firsthand the power of an AED.
There are many times patients have a cardiac arrest and we shock them and they're back to being fine.
He says many public places do have them, but more are needed.
Would it be great if there was a law that would kind of mandate as a building code or something if X number of people were here? I think it'd be great. These things save lives.
As for Jill Hutchinson, who lost her 50-year-old father to sudden cardiac arrest.
I wonder what if.
What if her dad would have been in a store with an AED? In 2019, Lowe's made a commitment to put AEDs in every store. Hutchinson hopes her heartbreaking story will prompt other stores to do the same.
Because you never know where, you never know when, and you never know what time that someone you love or someone you care about could have a sudden cardiac event, and having something like this on site could save their life.
Kevin Landers, 10 TV News.
What's next for the former Speaker of the House convicted in a massive money scheme? That's next. Welcome back. The company at the center of the state's major racketeering scandal may be trying to repurchase a West Virginia coal plant it spun off as part of the investigation. That's according to a new report by our CBS station in Charleston. First Energy sold the Pleasance Power Station as part of what federal prosecutors said was the largest money laundering scandal in state history. The plant is across the Ohio River from Marietta. Prosecutors say former Speaker of the House Larry Householder orchestrated a scheme with money paid by First Energy through dark money groups. The funding helped him to be elected as Speaker. He then passed a $1 billion bailout bill, the vast majority of which benefited the power company. Pleasance is scheduled to be closed by June, but the West Virginia governor and members of the West Virginia legislature are mounting a push for First Energy to buy it back. The state's governor says it's about jobs and keeping power costs down.
I mean, when it really boils down to it, I don't know the exact number, but there's 155 or 60, employees at the plant that are direct employees. But think of the coal miners.
The jobs that are at the plant are not the only people that will be affected by what's being proposed here. Hundreds of thousands of Mon Power and Potomac Edison customers across the state will also be affected through having higher electric rates, higher bills.
The state's utility regulator this year ordered FirstEnergy to submit a report on the possibility of buying the plant. That report is due Friday. And a quick mention about former House Speaker Larry Householder and the former Republican Chairman Matt Borges. Both face 20 years in prison. They are free until being sentenced. The judge is awaiting a report he will use to determine the length of their sentences. That will likely happen this summer. Thank you for being here this morning. I'm Clay Gordon. Tracy Townsend returns next week for a very special edition of Face the State on the 2-month anniversary of the East Palestine train derailment. Have a great rest of your Sunday.